I think one of the main reasons why we don't seem to have improved much is because I don't think a lot of people maybe are learning the right lessons in a lot of cases. Because I mean, there are people who commit wrongdoings, but then there's the rest of us who are onlookers. And I think for the rest of us, we already know kind of what we should do and what we shouldn't do. But what's happening is that we're being a lot of people are, instead of learning to understand things and look at what is the mature way to proceed, how do we go through with all this, they're learning to instead dehumanize people. And the categorization or the criteria by which people are dehumanized completely is expanding at an alarming rate, to the point where people who haven't even done anything wrong but have somewhat of an open-minded perspective on something that is becoming an increasingly closed-minded span of topics are becoming dehumanized likewise among the others. So to go to the question I was actually going to ask, sort of based on that, the COC, from everything that I've gleaned, as I said, I kind of didn't know about it before today, but from what I've gathered, is the closest thing to law and order in terms of conduct related stuff in the Smash community. It's obviously not straight up law, but that's sort of the direction of it. And you seem to be putting in a lot of effort to have an organized way to respond to and deal with these kind of wrongdoings, and also to sort of assess and categorize the nature and degree of any kind of wrongdoing that is committed. So my question to you, and this is not something that there's an easy, simple answer to, because if there was, we would be in a different world. But how can we proceed? How do you feel about the community taking this kind of justice, so to speak, into its own hands, which results in this cancel culture, which results in this constant dehumanization and really just more hatred that doesn't actually solve the problem? How do you feel about that, comparing it to the organized attempts at justice that you and the COC put together? And what can we do to move past this kind of disgusting vigilante, uninformed justice that the community tries to has just become standard on Twitter?
Yeah, so this is one thing I don't get to talk about a lot, so I'm glad you asked this question. But one of the reasons the COC, one of the things that we were most sensitive to when we were writing our rules and everything like that, was the fact that we want to be an alternative to the public crucifixion. And that's not only going to be better for the person who made the mistake or the predator, well, depending, but it's going to be better for the victim, because they're not going to have to bare their soul to the internet and have people pick them apart or slut shame them or whatever, right? Like, having these discussions with people that actually care about your well-being, and who actually want the right thing to happen, that is so different from Twitter. Twitter is, a lot of people want to have an opinion, and that you got to make a tweet about it. Very few people are satisfied with saying, oh, we don't know everything. Or even if you do say that, sometimes people are like, no, you have to condemn, or you're a pedophile supporter, or whatever.
Exactly.
Right? Like, this extremism you're talking about is so present in online spaces. So the whole point. All right, I'm just going to give an example. So a year ago, I think, I don't know, the Code of Conduct released a ban decision to ban Captain Zach for 5 years. And we had an incredibly rough time of it, because the details of why were not something we could disclose.
Yeah.
If we wanted Zach to grow and become a better person, right? So if we believed that there was some potential, then blasting him on social media for what the things that led to our ban decision would just make people like do what we're talking about: cancel, crucify, harm. It would do a lot more harm than good. So we just had to eat that. We just had to accept that the community didn't understand, and there's a lot of people that just want to. I mean, trying to think of the best way to say this.
Mm-hmm.
So some things don't need the entire 100,000 person whatever Smash community to weigh in on.
Yeah, great point.
And obviously, there are times when it is important. For example, when you identify an adult who grooms children, everybody needs to know that, so they will never let that adult around children again, right? There are some things. But do we need to know about every misunderstanding ever in the Smash community? I don't know. I don't think that people's privacy, it's not our entertainment. You know,
Yeah.
what happens with people is not entertainment, and some of it is necessary, like I said, because people need to protect themselves. But not everything is, and it's always going to be complicated to balance people feeling like, oh, I'm powerless, I'm not seeing what's behind the scenes, with a victim isn't going to come forward if people think that she was a slut, right? Like,
Yeah.
she just won't come forward because she knows people are going to say that, and then the guy that raped her or whatever is going to walk away. Like,
Yeah. But
there's a very balance.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's like it's great to hear that from you guys as well too. I think some people don't recognize that that's one of the main things that you guys are pursuing as well, to have an alternative to that. I'm sure a lot of people, like on the panel and just here, like, you know, the viewers watching and stuff too, or who are going to watch, like, I've seen the Social Dilemma that's like come out, right, and kind of just talking about, and even if you haven't seen it, a lot of us are aware, being gamers, being essentially the early adopters of technology, a lot of us are like function in the social media space, and we have a tendency to get sucked up in this polarization, right, and this like crucifixion, and this finding entertainment in things that should not be entertaining, right? So to speak, right? Things that shouldn't be, like you said, like we don't need to have, like, I'll just be real, like you don't need to have the whole circus be a part of this, right? Like that's just not like what we need. Like it's something where it's like when there's a situation happening and there's an issue happening, there's people coming together, we need to figure it out for best for like everyone, right? And there's certain things that, like you said, need to be known, and there's certain things that it's like these details doesn't really do anything, doesn't help anyone. All it does is make something worse and causes people up for discussion to say things and go from there. And it's had a lot of repercussions, like you see that a ton and ton in our scene. Arguably even more so than I feel like any other kind of like scene in the FGC, or like even in general esports too. And it's been a detriment. I'm sure for people like myself, like who work behind the scenes and do stuff, and you're trying to do the best for Smash, it's been a detriment that way. It's been a detriment to victims, like you said before. You know, it's been a detriment to even like progress on the matter, because then it just becomes this huge dichotomy, and it just feeds in this whole issue that we're already having from a humanity standpoint
yeah.
because of social media and the polarization happening there. But I feel like it's exponential when it comes to gaming, because again, we tend to be early adopters of a lot of these things. So it's great to hear that you guys are doing that. I do really hope that we see more people stand up. I'm sure, like you said before, like you've been hoping, and there's a lot of people that just haven't done anything. Like I'm hoping that maybe we'll get some change, because this is a really big event. I know a lot of people are paying attention. Even some people from behind the scenes are paying attention. Um, I mean, of course, I won't go into too much detail, like eternally, as far as like Red Bull, but I also know like that's something that we've had as a big discussion in terms of like what we can do to make scenes better, make it more inclusive, tackle diversity, and really just help these spaces be better for people to be the best they can be and have fun and enjoy themselves in the places that they are, whatever playgrounds we choose to play in. And so I do think there's more companies taking notice than before, in 2020, because of the alarming rate where these things are hitting people. But again, we have to see how that pans out. A lot of times we have these things and it's a blip and then it's gone. But I don't know. I do think the atmosphere is a little bit different than normal, in a lot of things, and in this included. So I guess we'll
Yeah.
see.
If I could just address one
I
more.
think.
Oh, I'm
Oh
sorry.
yeah, go ahead, Cosmos.
Yeah, I just wanted to address one more thing on that, because both of what you said was in some way stemming from my question, and one common note, which is a point that Dr. Piggy made, which is a great effort from the COC, is to kind of not let all those details out there, so that the victim, as well as other people involved, are not just crucified like all of that. But on a broader spectrum, and I think that's great, by the way, but on a broader spectrum, that still is running away in a way from a bigger, maybe not a bigger problem, but another problem. And how do we stop the crucifixion from happening when information actually does get out there? How do we normalize a culture of discussion and attempted understanding instead of normalizing an increasing culture of absurd censorship that grows and grows and continues to encompass every corner of our lifestyles?
So this is something as a psychologist I think about a lot too.
Yeah.
I think, I don't know if this is a spicy take, but maybe not everybody will like it.
Bring the heat. We're ready for it.
We can always edit it out, right?
Yeah, man. It should always be there.
One of the issues that plagues gaming in particular is our consistently young population.
Yes.
So it's commonly cited that the prefrontal cortex is not fully developed until age 25. And prefrontal cortex supports a lot of complex decision making, abstract thought, and perspective taking. So those are the kinds of things you need to be able to look at a situation and be like, well, maybe there's more to it, or like maybe I should wait and listen. Those are things that adults have learned to do. Well, many adults, right? That fewer teenagers have learned to do. And it's not, I'm not saying it's either biology or culture, it's both. But in the end, what it amounts to is that a teenager is more likely to make a snap decision or see something in black and white than a 30-year-old or 40-year-old adult. So as long as gaming is a demographic of young folks, we're always going to be dealing with extremes in thought, black and white thinking, right? But one way we could fix that is by having mature adults in leadership.
Yes,
right?
Exactly.
Yeah, and setting an example that, like, dude, you might want to cool it because we actually haven't heard from her what happened. Or, I just think that I said to one of my grad student friends, like, am I just going to be educating teenagers for the rest of my life? And she's like, there will always be teenagers in gaming, so probably.
They don't get any older, even if you do.
Well, like, kind of, touching on some of the things, I think there's a broad intersection of, for lack of a better comparison for it, an intersection of people that are very anti-cancel culture and anti-COC. And, I've actually gotten a lot of mileage out of trying to explain to people that, in the same way that you did, that the Code of Conduct Committee is actually the avenue to address a lot of those concerns, because the not only do we empower the victims of an abuse to come forward, but actually serves as a due process for somebody that's been accused, as opposed to being instead of putting it all out there in the public and turning it into a Twitter fight and ultimately having that be, whoever gets more likes and more retweets is the winner of that argument. That does not seem to be a very productive way of solving these situations. I think, taking a step back, one of my broader critiques of the current community might be not so much, because I think a lot of the, the cancel culture critiques, a lot of them are bad faith and unhelpful. But one of the ones that I think is meaningful, from my own biases, that there is this idea that unless you're perfect, you can't really advocate for a certain situation. And I've always been of the opinion that I'd rather have an imperfect ally in the fight trying to, help us solve the problem of this misconduct, rather than a perfect, a morally perfect bystander, if that is. And, one of the things that I fear is, because of, in the absence of the Code of Conduct Committee, I know you're trying to help solve this issue, but in the absence of the Code of Conduct Committee, and we have the situation where everything is adjudicated online, it's kind of going to set up this perverse cycle where people are going to be incentivized not to participate and not to try to help solve these issues, because they're afraid of getting called out for their own imperfections.
Exactly.
And I, trying to build off what Cosmos was talking about, how do we create a environment where, despite people having imperfections, make it so that we can have a nuanced conversation on these issues, on the topics, outside of the conduct or context of just misconduct, but community issues as a whole.
Right. So a lot of the things we've been talking about are a problem not just in Smash, but everywhere on Twitter, in politics, in other hobby scenes, and even in academia. Right? These snap reactions, this anonymity fueling us versus them kinds of thinking.
Yeah.
But I think what, ironically, is the solution is a community. It's a community. It's like when you care or give the other person the benefit of the doubt. When you saw this person at a major and you were friendly towards each other instead of shitty. Like, those are the things that make us think twice before we toss somebody into a bucket. But like with coronavirus, we don't really have, all we have right now is Twitter.
Yeah.
And that's like, unfortunately, in some ways, you know, the fact that we don't have tournaments means that maybe we can make some new rules when they come back, right? But it also means that we're losing that sense of who we played Smash with and why. We're not meeting those people anymore. So yes, you can advocate for empathy. You can advocate for education. But ultimately, like, getting people to care about each other probably has more to do with their experience in the community than like their individual differences.
It's almost like a solidarity is the answer to the ills that plague us all on some level.
You imagine
if only there were a podcast to talk about that as an issue, right?